Hi, I made my first crochet sweater. Not for me though, but for my dog. I always was against dressing up dogs, especially as an owner of a miniature dachshund. Well, two of them. Their size already comes with a stigma. But as temperatures dropped, I saw Stasha trembling when we had to wait for Boris to do his business. We tried buying sweaters. It was quite a ride because everything was either too wide or too short for a sausage dog. So I decided to make one on my own. As I see her running around, it needs some adjustments. I could have started decrease rounds faster, but I was afraid it will be too hard to pull through her head. Mistakes were made, lessons are learned, but if you want to make a sweater for your dog, I'm going to show you how I made this one. First, we need some yarn. I chose this green acrylic yarn that I had just laying around in my stash. I think it suits Stasha very well. I used 2 crochet hooks. First, I used 4mm crochet hook for the ribbing and the first row, and then I used 5.5mm crochet hook for the rest of the project. We will also need tapestry needle, something to cut the yarn, and stitch markers. I started the sweater from neck down, so first we need to do ribbing. Ribbing is easy. We start with a slip knot, then we chain 11. You can also chain more or less, depends if you want to make it wider or smaller than what I did. After you are done with your chain, we need to start from second loop from the hook. So we are going to single crochet all the way down. In my case, it's 10 single crochets. If you decided to make it different size, you also start from second loop from the hook. After we are done with this row, we are going to chain 1 and turn our work. In the rest of the rows, we are going to crochet in back loop only. We are going to make single crochets, 10 in my case, in this loop, the one I pulled my needle through. How many rows should we do like this? Well, it depends on the size of your dog's neck. In my case, it will be 46 rows, but it depends on your dog. So you need to measure it and check it while you work on it. It is important that you know how many rows you have when you're done with making the ribbing. So either you memorize how many rows you have or you write it down. It depends on your preference. I prefer to write it down because I have memory of a goldfish. But one thing you have to remember at all times is to chain 1 before you turn your work. Otherwise, it will not be proper shape. It will start making a triangle. Continue working on the ribbing until you have the size that you need for your dog, and I will meet you when we both are finished. Also, keep in mind that it shouldn't be too loose or too tight. Now that I'm finished with my rows, I'm going to sew them together using single crochets. You can do a slip stitch. It doesn't matter that much, but I personally went for a single crochets. What matters is that you have to make sure that they are aligned and that you pull your hook through both stitches on both sides that you're sewing. After you're done with previous step, it's time to turn our work. From this point on, we are going to work in rounds instead of rows. So we are going to crochet around the collar. I'm going to chain 3, and then because my collar had 46 rows, I will put in 47 double crochets. So in this round, we are going to basically make 1 increase. If you ended up with any other numbers of rows, you're going to make 1 more stitch than the number of rows. After you're done with this round, you're going to find third, so the top loop of chain 3 that we did at the beginning of this round, and make a slip stitch into it. It's also time to switch for a bigger hook. After we switch for bigger sized hook, we are going to chain 3, and we are going to chain 3 every round. It's something you need to keep in mind while working on this sweater. In round number 2, I need to end up with 48 stitches, so I'm going to make an increase in my first stitch. By an increase, I mean putting 2 double crochets into one stitch. After this increase, I'm just going to continue with my double crochets without any other increases. So I will end up with one more stitch in this round than the previous round. In my case, I had 4 increase rounds. So we are on round 2. Round 3, I was alternating my increases, so I put the increase in the last stitch of the round, and in round 4, I also put my increase in the first stitch of the round, if that makes sense. You can make it in the first, you don't have to alternate, it doesn't matter that much. It will be on the bottom, no one will see it, unless your dog is very, very tall. But number of increase rounds depends on the size of your dog. In my case, well, I made 2 sweaters. I made one yesterday and I'm making one today. They both needed only 4 rounds of increases before I did the holes for the pose. Number of rounds depends on different factors. For example, yarn you're using, your hook size, so how tall are your stitches, and also the size of your dog, so you need to measure it before you go to next step. Our next step is pose. What I did is I crocheted 5 double crochets, then I chained 7 and I skipped 7 stitches, so I made not a sleeve but a hole for the pole, if you know what I mean. Then I marked on the other side 5 double crochets that I needed to make at the end of the round, and also 7 stitches that I need to skip after chaining 7. So remember, we start with 5 double crochets, we chain 7, skip 7 stitches, then we continue with our double crochets up until we need to chain 7, skip 7 stitches, and make 5 double crochets at the end of the round. This is what worked for both of my dogs, even though they have slightly different body types, even though they are both sausage dogs. Boris is a little bit shorter and chunkier, and Stasia is more thin and longer. So yeah, it worked for both of them, but maybe you will need to move stitches around or make the hole bigger. Remember, we are just playing around, making it our own. But very important thing is to measure it on your dog, especially with steps like this. After you're done with the round when we are making holes for the pose, we are going to crochet another round. And I wanted to show you this round because we are going to crochet in the chain loops. So we are not skipping the chain that we previously made, but we are going to put double crochets in all of the loops from the chain that we made. I hope it was obvious, but sometimes patterns, well, ask you for strange things. That's why I wanted to include it in my video. And I feel like at this point I should mention that from this point on my tutorial kind of goes downhill. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned in my intro to this tutorial, some mistakes were made. So I did 3 more rows without decreasing, and I should have decreased after this row. But this is the problem with Stasia's sweater. I did the same thing with Boris's sweater, and I thought it will be fine on Stasia. It fits him very well, as I previously mentioned, he's a little bit more chunky than Stasha. So yes, I have to keep it in mind in the future when I do more sweaters for them. But it's a lesson learned. So maybe in case of your dog, you need to make another 3 rows without decreases. Maybe you need to make more rows without decreases. Maybe you need to decrease a little bit faster. So yeah, you need to try it on your dog and see where you're going. But in case of Stasha's sweater, I did 3 rows without decreases, as I mentioned. Then I did 2 rows with one decrease in first stitch, and second row with decrease in last stitch. As I previously mentioned, I was alternating my increases, and I was also alternating or trying to alternate my decreases. And then I made 2 more rows, but this time I did 2 decreases in each of them. In case you don't know how to decrease double crochet, you yarn over, then pull through first loop and through 2 loops. Then with 2 loops on the hook, you yarn over, pull through second loop and pull through 2 loops and then 3 loops, and that's it. It is a little bit complicated than when you decrease with single crochets. That's why I wanted to include it in this video in case you need a refresher. So after I thought that I was done with my rounds, even though I wasn't and I should have frogged some and redo them, I decided to make a ribbing. Just a finishing touch on the bottom. To make it, I chained 5 and then starting from second loop from the hook, I made 4 single crochets. When I reached my work, I slip stitch into the work, so into the stitch that is above the chain, if that makes sense. I hope you will see it on the video clearly. But yeah, similarly to the ribbing that we started with, in case of this ribbing, you make your single crochets into back loop only. The ribbing on the bottom that I made, well, it's more decorative than anything else, so it doesn't hold the sweater in place very well, and the sweater could roll up or ride up while Stasha was running. So what I did when I was done with it, instead of frogging it, I put an elastic around it. Well, my problem in general with the sweater is I didn't want to make it too tight, so I made it actually a little bit too wide, but not as bad as some of the sweaters that we got for Stasha in the store, okay? And lessons were learned. And with this video, maybe you also can learn from my mistake. I am a little bit disappointed that I didn't catch that it is too wide for her before taking her on a walk. But, well, the thing is, when we were trying it at home, there were treats involved. And I think what went wrong is the fact that when she sees treats, she doesn't move that much. She sits or she lays down because she wants her treat, right? So I didn't spot it. I should have, but I didn't. So yeah, I hope with the next one I will, well, correct my mistake. But I'm glad that I did this sweater and I have some point of reference for the future projects. And I hope that if you were trying to make a sweater based on this short video tutorial, not really a tutorial, more of a guide how to figure it out yourself, then yeah, that your work turned out way better than mine. I guess that's the problem with wearables for both humans and animals. But anyways, if this video gave you any inspiration to make a crochet sweater for your dog, please give it a like. And if you like crochet content in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. I hope to see you next time. Bye!